It is July 12th, 2024, and with 116 days until the presidential election between Donald Trump and Joe Biden, we will be going through an updated 2024 map according to my personal prediction, applied with also polls and speculations and predictions from other people and other sources as well. But before we get started on the main states, let's begin with the popular vote. And right now, Donald Trump is leading by 2.9 percentage points on average. In this whole aggregate right now, Biden only leads in one poll by 2. And we can see here after June and July had passed by, Donald Trump has really been gaining a lot of momentum and Joe Biden has really been falling, and a lot of Democrats have wanted Joe Biden to step aside. Meanwhile, others stay by his side and say that he will continue to run. It is really up to everybody to really gauge what the situation should be and whether he should continue in this race. A majority of people who have taken polls have said that Joe Biden should actually step aside and put a different candidate, but that's not for this video. It will actually take into account my prediction though, but we can see here, even on the 5A race, Donald Trump leads by 4.3 percentage points on average. We can see a lot of that drop that Joe Biden has endured has not really gone too much for Donald Trump, but more or less the third-party candidates, especially Kennedy, have been gaining as Joe Biden has been losing, because a lot of these candidates maybe wouldn't want to vote for Donald Trump, but would be open in voting for a third-party candidate. But let's begin on our map between Donald Trump and Joe Biden, and we will begin with the safe states for the Republican Party. First, the Republicans will get the states of Utah, Alaska, Idaho, Montana, Wyoming, North and South Dakota, all of Nebraska except the 2nd District, Kansas, Oklahoma, Missouri, Arkansas, Louisiana, Mississippi, Alabama, Tennessee, South Carolina, Kentucky, West Virginia, Indiana, and that 2nd District of Maine, which was not a safe margin for Donald Trump in 2020. But this time around, since Donald Trump will be gaining in the state of Maine, it will be put into that safe column. Republicans are at 126. We're also going to add the states of Iowa and Ohio, where Republicans are now at 149. And these two states have been very strong for Donald Trump and Republicans over the past 8 to 12 years. They've been gaining consistently. These were two states that had voted Democrat in 2008 and in 2012 by pretty healthy margins, but Donald Trump had flipped them in 2016, and they see no signs of turning back in 2020. And from the polls we do currently have, we can see Trump leading by 11.5 in the state of Iowa and 10.7 in the state of Iowa in Ohio, which are basically safe margins in my eyes. And I think that Donald Trump will overestimate those polls a little bit, since he did overestimate them a large amount in the past two presidential elections actually. But for Biden's safe states, he's going to have the states of California, Oregon, and Washington, Hawaii. And I might want to point out that the states of Oregon and Washington, I think, are going to be a lot closer, as well as the state of Illinois. But most of these states up on the East Coast are still going to be heavily favored in his column. I will still add the 1st District of Maine, since he did win it by 23 percentage points. However, the states of New Jersey and New York will not be in that safe column this time around. The polling we have seen has been pretty horrible for Biden, where he only leads in the states by a likely margin. So they will not be going into that safe margin. Donald Trump will start with 149. Biden will start with 139. Trump does have a clear edge to begin with, and he will add a couple more states in the likely column, where he will add the states of Texas and Florida very easily into his column. And these are two states that Donald Trump won by pretty narrow amounts in 2020. But this time around, the Republicans and Donald Trump are expected to do very well. He leads by 9.2 percentage points in the state of Texas, and in the state of Florida, Trump leads by 7.6 percentage points. And I think a big deal about why Donald Trump will be gaining a lot in these two states is, number one, because Joe Biden is super unpopular in them, and they are more Republican. Republicans are favored in voter registration, and Donald Trump is pretty popular in those states compared to a lot of other swing states. They're more also in the South. Are more religious, and the trends among Hispanics in these two states have been very favorable for Republicans over the past decade. But moving now to the likely states for Democrats, they will be picking up the states of Colorado, the state of New York, and the state of New Jersey. And Colorado is pretty self-explanatory, since it is probably the most left-trending state, going from plus 5 points from Hillary Clinton to plus 13.5 for Biden. I expect the state to go backwards, not too much. The polls right now have it at 6.5 percentage points for Biden. I think that's fairly accurate. I actually think that Biden's going to win it by a little more than that. I give him right now probably 7 to 8, maybe closer to 6 as we continue to see him deteriorate. But right now, I'm going to keep it around 7. The states of New Jersey and New York, I think, are going to be on that higher end, maybe closer to 10 to 12. Right now, New York, as we discussed, is pretty close, and New Jersey the same amount. Right now, I give these states a higher chance of being likely than safe, mainly because of how bad that polling has been. And we see here they were such safe margins for Joe Biden, 23 percentage points in New York and 16 in the state of New Jersey. So this is very, very worrisome signs for him to see these two states not be placed in that safe column, but moving down to that likely column. And after the likely states, we're going to have Trump at 219, Biden at 191. But before we continue with this video, please like and subscribe, comment down all your suggestions in the section below, and please continue to watch all my videos and hit that bell and when you subscribe so you get all the notifications for my most recent uploads. Moving now to lean states. For Republicans, they will be picking up a considerable amount of lean states, starting with the states of North Carolina and Georgia. And these two states have been so favorable for Donald Trump. They've had consistent leads for him, and he has not really lost them. All the polls in North Carolina point to him winning by close to a likely margin. In the five-way race, we can see he leads by 7.7% in the state of North Carolina. So I think North Carolina is one of those states where Donald Trump needs to win, and he is most favored to win. Republicans have been winning the state since 2012 by pretty narrow amounts. I think this will be the highest win for Republicans in quite a while. I think the state's going to be vote more on the higher end, more 5 percentage points. And in Georgia, I think it's going to be not a tilt margin, but a lean margin as of now. Same thing with North Carolina. It's just been a state where Republicans have been doing well. This time around. Usually, I would say that this state is pretty long gone since it did trend pretty heavily for Democrats. Joe Biden was able to flip it from a Trump plus 5 to a Democrat plus 0.24. And that's because of those Atlanta suburbs trending heavily towards Democrats, a lot of black turnout. We can see here now that Trump leads by a pretty solid margin, and he is pretty favored in the state to win by maybe even a likely margin, but I think it's pretty fair to place the state in that lean margin for him. There are two more states that I consider to be likely states for Donald Trump, and those would be the states of Arizona and the states of Nevada. I think these two states are going to vote fairly in line. Usually the state of Arizona always votes to the right of the state of Nevada. I think this time around is very possible since Arizona is generally trending left and Nevada is trending right. But we see here in the 2024 polls that once again, Donald Trump has been leading every single poll added into the aggregate. In the five-way race, he leads by 6.4%, which is actually higher than the state of Georgia. And if we check the state of Nevada, we can see a very similar story where Donald Trump has had a consistent lead of 5.2 percentage points. And looking at the five-way race, he also leads by 5.2 percentage points. So these two states, as well as these other two states on the East Coast, are actually outside of that margin of error. So I think right now these two states are very, very heavily favored to vote for Donald Trump. I give them all probably around an 80% chance or higher of voting for Trump. I think right now it is more likely that Democrats lose the state of Arizona than Republicans lose some of these states over here just because of the situation that they are in. I mean, they don't even have their candidate right now. Like, they don't know if Joe Biden's going to be their candidate. So once they get that solved and once, Joe Biden can coalesce around his base, then maybe, this will change a bit. But the polls definitely have to reflect that. But without further ado, Democrats will still have a few lean states. I think the state of New Mexico will be the first lean state. I think Nebraska second, due to its left trending shifts, will be still in that lean column. And I'm going to put the state of Maine also barely in that lean column. I think Maine will vote around 2 points to Democrats. And this time around, there's been some pretty tight polls. Trump has led in, one. Biden has led in the other two. I think they'll very, very much win their districts by a solid amount, which will split the vote up here. And since this district is more favorable for Democrats than this one is for Republicans, it'll end up being a very narrow margin for Democrats. In New Mexico, I had originally placed this state as being more favorable, but some recent data has shown otherwise, and there has been another poll that has not been added to RCP, but is included in other aggregates where it does show a very much narrower race. Joe Biden won the state by 10.8%, which is pretty considerable, but the Hispanic trends will definitely carry out in Nevada and the state of New Mexico, as it has been carrying out in every single other state around it, except really Colorado. But with all these states filled out, Trump is at 268, Biden is at 199, and we're going to be filling out the closest states. In my opinion, it will be these 4 Rust Belt states, the state of Virginia and the state of New Hampshire, beginning with Trump's tilt states. To first of all, the state of Pennsylvania right now, I think, is even on that border with being lean. I mean, these polls are very, very, very good for him. He's up 5.3 percentage points on average. Joe Biden has been falling consistently in that polling average, and it is more so Pennsylvania than a lot of these other seats. He does only lead by 3 percentage points in the 5-way race, but it is still a pretty considerable amount, since he did end up losing the state by 1.2% in the 2020 election. But right now, I think this state's going to vote closer to that 2-point margin. I could move it into that lean margin next time around, but now I'm going to keep it just under 2. I think the states of Michigan and Wisconsin will vote pretty similarly to each other. Usually, I would say that Michigan and Wisconsin would both be voting closer in line to Pennsylvania, but right now I do think Pennsylvania is voting to the right, especially of Michigan. The polls do look really tight. The 5-way race is currently tied, and Trump does lead in the 2-way race. And then the same thing in Wisconsin. Trump has been gaining a little bit since the debate. It has been really tight in the polls most of the time, where he leads by 2.6 percentage points on average. In the 5-way race, he does lead by 3 percentage points. It has been a pretty recent trend, since we are used to this high cycle, that Wisconsin has been pretty tight as compared to Pennsylvania. But I think it will still vote for Trump by a tilt margin. I'd say right now between 1 or 2 percentage points. And Joe Biden will be receiving a tilt state of Virginia right now. I think Virginia will be very, very close. Joe Biden actually won the state by 10 percentage points in the 2020 election, and it is pretty considerable, because back in the 2016 election, it was only Democrat plus 5. So a lot of people might have thought the state was gone, but the polls nowadays and this time around do have it only as Biden plus 2.2. In that 5-way race, Biden plus 1.5, which does fall in that tilt margin. I think the state will vote for Biden, but just under 2 percentage points. I think the same thing will happen with the state of New Hampshire. Right now, I see New Hampshire as being one of the tightest races, where Joe Biden only leads by 3. The latest poll by a pretty reliable pollster has Trump leading the state by 2. But right now, with all that's going on, and since he did win New Hampshire by 7.4 percentage points, I think New Hampshire will vote for Joe Biden by around 1 percentage point. And we come now to probably the closest state, in my opinion, the state of Minnesota. And this is the first time that I can say that I think Donald Trump is narrowly favored to win this state. Right now, I think it is like a 51-49 in Trump's favor. It could really go either way. But the reason why I'm putting it right now in Donald Trump's column is because we have seen such a rightward swing among states around it. It is currently in that toss-up column. The latest poll doesn't have it as a tie, and there had been other polls released, not added to this aggregate, that have shown a really tight result for Joe Biden and Donald Trump. But this will be the map right now: 322 for Donald Trump, 216 for Joe Biden, and I think Donald Trump will flip the states of Georgia, Arizona, and Nevada fairly easily. He will flip the states of Wisconsin, Michigan, and Pennsylvania, and he will add the state of Minnesota, which has not voted Republican since 1972, when Richard Nixon won the state by 5.5 percentage points. But that's going to be all for this video. Thank you guys so much for watching. Please like and subscribe, and check out my other content.